Welcome to Murder Mile. Today, I'm standing on the junction of Hertford Street and Park Lane in Mayfair, W1. One street south of the last events of Tudor Simeonov. One street east of the monstrous murder blamed on the horror maestro Lon Chaney. A few doors down from the bloody butler's big blowout. And a short walk northeast of the tragic war hero who would never return home. Coming soon to Murder Mile. Engulfed by a flank of five-star hotels. If you're a talentless, fame-hungry personality vacuum with fake teeth, fake tan, fake tits and a fake life, with a troweled-on smile, a solo brain cell reserved for pouting, and a single expression of, "Oh my God," uttered like a constipated frog, then this is the place for you. But since the early 1700s, when Park Lane was developed as a playboy's playground, it has always been a place where prostitutes and punters meet. As rightfully, a lady of the night should want to meet a man with money and hopefully manners, rather than a drunk thug with fast fists and hardly a tuppence. At 12:45 a.m, on Saturday the 14th of January 1956, Ruby, a local sex worker, was dropped off at this spot by her husband and pimp called Ernest. In his own words, "It was the last time I saw her alive," as when he returned to their flat at 32 Westbourne Terrace, Ruby had been hatcheted to death in their bed. As the police's prime suspect, Ernest would lay the blame for her murder on a mysterious man he had neither seen, met, and had only heard about from his dead wife in passing. Unable to provide a single shred of evidence that this suspect even existed, his only description was that he was a bearded man. But was this the truth, a lie, or a shaky alibi? My name is Michael. I am your tour guide, and this is Murder Mile. Episode 188, The Bearded Man, Part 2. For the police, the most likely culprit in any murder is often the most obvious suspect. Stranger killings are incredibly rare, as the guilty party is usually the person with the most to lose or gain, like a relative, a lover, a friend, a flatmate, or a business partner. Of which, Ernest was all five, wrapped up in one. With mounting debts, a change in circumstance, and a strange situation in which he helped sell his wife for sex. Should a jury find him guilty, then the only rightful punishment would be his death. But how could they find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, when the bearded man may have just been a myth? There was a wealth of evidence against Ernest Bolton. This was his home, this was his wife, and these were his debts. With his fingerprints found at the scene, his car spotted loitering nearby, a 45-minute gap in his timeline between when he last saw her and when his friends saw him, as well as a 1 hour, 17-minute delay between the time he discovered her body and when his solicitor called the police, during which time he failed to raise the alarm, to check her vital signs, or even to call for an ambulance. As to account for these inconsistencies in his alibi, his story had gaping holes and glaring omissions. He would blame his delay calling the police on shock and his prior conviction for running a brothel. With no sign of a break-in, he couldn't explain why he had a key to the flat, but not to the main door. As her handbag was missing, suggesting a possible robbery. He couldn't explain where it had gone. And yet, 11 days after the police had examined the scene, he miraculously found it under the grill. Asked if he knew she was dead, he replied, I'm not sure. I think so. I could see that something was wrong. And although her head was caved in and her blood splattered up the wall, he did nothing to help her. Seen in situ, her autopsy was conducted that morning by Dr. Keith Simpson at Paddington Mortuary. Based on her body temperature, time of death occurred between 12 AM and 2 AM, with a 45-minute gap in Ernest's timeline fitting it perfectly. With no signs of sexual violence or restraint, her assailant was unlikely to be a sadist, but someone with a grudge. Found prone and naked, Ruby was attacked with an axe wielded with such savagery that the blade embedded 8 times behind her right rear of her skull, leaving wounds 3.5 to 5 inches long and 2 inches deep, which had lacerated her brain. And as she had tried to fight back, the thumb of her left hand was almost entirely severed as she slowly bled to death. Her murder was frenzied, violent and spiteful. And yet no weapon matching those wounds was found. And with the flat's fire being gas-powered, it was likely the axe was brought here by the attacker, suggesting premeditation. Ruby had met several men that night, including Ernest. One was a West Country client who was due to stay the whole night, but there was no evidence he had either arrived or left. One was a seller of erotic magazines, which Ruby had £1 set aside to buy, but none were seen amongst her stash. And of the £11 she'd earned that night, roughly £300 today, not 1 penny was found in the flat or in her handbag. Ernest's story was sketchy at best. But the biggest was his alibi of the bearded man. Unable to provide any more details. He didn't know his name, age, address, occupation, or even a vague description. But that didn't mean he was lying. Given the shocking sight he'd seen, Ernest's actions were as irrational as any man who'd found his wife murdered. When questioned, his grief was obvious, being a broken man who'd lost the woman he loved. Speaking to sex workers who knew them both, his car was spotted in Piccadilly and Mayfair, as he had stated, during the time of the murder. And given the violence of the attack, the culprit should have had her blood on his hands, face and clothes. But having stayed over that night at the Murdens' home, he had neither washed his hands nor changed his clothes, and both were free of blood. Questioned by the police, with not enough evidence to charge, Ernest Bolton was released on bail. With a primary suspect looking less likely, needing to either prove or disprove his alibi about the bearded man. The police examined several other fingerprints found at the murder scene and found a match. But was this a viable suspect or a convenient scapegoat? Born in the summer of 1928, Leonard Vincent Atter was a slightly undersized boy born in the Spinney, a quiet residential street in the town of Bedford. As the second youngest of 5, with 2 brothers and 2 sisters, his upbringing was unremarkable. Educated to a level where a scholarship was mooted, as the family's finances were too slim to get him into grammar school. He left at 14. He spent 4 years at a travel agency, 5 years as an infantryman in Blackwatch, and by the age of 24, had become a bookkeeper at a timber merchant's in Bedford. Blessed with a fanciful imagination, a love of writing, and a religious zeal, being a lifelong member of the Salvation Army, Leonard devoted his spare time to his faith, playing trumpet in the Salvation Army band, as well as being a bookkeeper and secretary for its infamous periodicals, War Cry and Our Little Soldier. Always being neatly dressed, well-spoken and clean-shaven, even as a boy, he stood out as odd. As a teen who struggled to keep friends and to seize the affections of girls, it wasn't only his Weasley body, his moon-like face, and his dark sunken eyes that made others uneasy. It was also his creepy demeanor. Being both a devout Catholic and a chronic masturbator, Leonard was a conflicted boy. With God in his heart, the devil in his soul, a swelling in his pants, and ever the sadist, perversions on his mind. In March 1950, at a registry office in Bedford, Leonard married Lena Frieda Schaefer, a German woman whose dominance excited him. As being a little bit older and a little bit taller, he was attracted to her power. Together the two had a daughter, but no longer finding him sexually appealing, they later separated. This was unsurprising, as struggling with little man syndrome, Leonard openly bragged about the size of his penis, that he could satisfy any woman, that his capacious sexual appetite stretched to Troilism, S&M and group sex, but never homosexuality. And as a habitual user of sex workers, so gifted was his sexual prowess that even seasoned sex workers paid him for sex. As a regular in every red light district, he was regarded as a good client, who paid well, was no trouble, who had a few odd kinks, but who doesn't, and could procure some mucky books at the drop of a hat. Across his odd little life, he was convicted of only one criminal offence, but it was not for violence. Out of a small office on Midland Road in Bedford, Leonard was running a small publishing house which sold self-penned pornography featuring lurid sexual dalliances between bad girls and wicked men. Considered tame by today's standards, his filthy mind earned him £20 a week, a decent wage. But unable to separate fact from fiction, filth from fantasy, In May 1954, he stepped over the line as a lover of erotic literature to a convicted sex pest when he sent some of his books, signed Yours Lustfully, Victor Love, to 17 girls who'd been the subject of indecent assaults and even rapes. Charged with only publishing obscene books and sending it through the post, he was sentenced to 2 6-month sentences to be served consecutively and a £5 fine. When later questioned by a tabloid, he whined, "It was just boy meets girl stuff. You know, I never meant anything. I was just lonely." Having served 9 months in prison, he was released from Wormwood Scrubs on the 31st of December 1955 and was asked to resign from the Salvation Army. To disguise his identity, Leonard, who had always been clean-shaven, grew a bushy beard as he returned home to his rented lodging in London. Two weeks after his release, in a part of Paddington that he was known to frequent, Ruby Bolton was murdered. On the New Year's Eve, as premature fireworks burst across the London skyline, 27-year-old Leonard Atter strode through the prison gates. With a new year, a fresh start, and shadowing his pale moon-like face, a dark bushy beard, all thick and coarse. Inside, he had undergone 7 months of psychiatric assessment to correct a minor aberration of my mind, which had previously got me into trouble. Although not once was he ashamed of his crime. As the cold winter air filled his lungs, Leonard sucked in the much-lamented sights and smells of the city. As he slunk past the prostitutes of Wormwood Scrubs, and the tube train shunted by the sex workers of Shepherd's Bush, Notting Hill, Bayswater and Paddington, until he got off at Regent's Park. Convicted of the offence of obscenity, his life was left in tatters. Lena had left him, taking their child. He had lost his job as a bookkeeper. He had barely a few shillings in his pocket. And his relationship with a 23-year-old window dresser called Thelma Rudkin had collapsed. He had no one, and he had nothing. Only Leonard was not the only person who would be punished as a prisoner for his crimes. Before his conviction, Leonard and Thelma had signed a contract on a lodging at 6 St George's Terrace in Primrose Hill, just north of Regent's Park. Since then, she had left him. But as legally, a woman could not rent a flat of her own, she was stuck living in a one-roomed lodging with a registered sex offender. By day, she sat amongst the safety of the other residents in the communal kitchen, warmed by a roaring stove that was kept stoked by broken logs and chopped up kindling. But by night, she was forced to share a bed with a creepy little man who had a suitcase full of porn, a raging libido, an insatiable need for sex, and having spent 9 months in a men's prison, he lay next to his ex in a cold, loveless bed. Thankfully, Thelma knew that Leonard was not a violent man, just an odd fantasist who hated being rejected by women. 11 days after his release, and 3 days before her death, Leonard prowled his usual haunts, only being too broke to pay for sex. He sought out ladies in need of his mucky-macks and lurid literature. Without an ounce of shame, Leonard would later confess to the police.
I went to Mayfair with the purpose of meeting a prostitute I know. She was talking to another prostitute on the corner of Hertford Street and Park Lane. I know her as Ruby.
Having dropped her off, Ernest confirmed she was there. But as the street was unlit and he'd kept his distance, he could neither describe nor recall Leonard at her. At first, she didn't recognize him because of his beard.
I was talking to Ruby for about 5 minutes. I'd been with her before. 9 or 10 times I'd had intercourse with her for payment.
Having loaned £1 off Teresa, he propositioned Ruby. But with her rate averaging £5 and £15 for the night, she politely turned him down.
I told her where I'd been.
About prison and his offences.
She sympathised and went so far as to say that I should have a cup of tea with her the following night.
She gave him a business card. She agreed to buy 2 books for £1, and he arrived home at midnight. By the next morning, Friday the 13th of January, things were looking up for Leonard, the ex-con. Starting a new job as a bookkeeper, to tide him over until payday, Thelma had agreed to loan him a further £4. After work, in the little kitchen, as they sat supping tea, eating a light meal, and being warmed by the roaring log fire, he unashamedly told Teresa about Ruby and the mucky books he planned to sell, stating,
I haven't had a woman for 9 months. I like her. She has invited me round to stay the night.
Dressed in a black suit, black shoes, black raincoat, and carrying a small black briefcase full of porn, Leonard left home at 11 p.m, like a little dark shadow which dotted the dark-lit streets of the city. A city which would soon drip red with Ruby's blood. That day had particular tensions for Ruby and Ernest. The rent was due, the debts were rising, Ruby was working hard, and Ernest had slept amongst the soils of a slew of men who'd banged his wife for money. The basics had become more difficult to buy. Their last meal together came at a kind client's coin. Their last savings went on a new hairdo. They were stuck in a rut. He could no longer drive her to pick up her punters or to run a legitimate taxi firm. That night, she earned £4 from her first client, possibly £3 from the second, £5 from the third. But having gone missing from 11 p.m. for 40 minutes, most likely she gained extra punters. Ernest next spotted her back on a patch at 11:40 p.m. They spoke briefly, but its contents were unheard. He then circled from Piccadilly to Park Lane until he saw her enter a cab with a little guy at midnight. As per usual, by the junction of Gloucester Terrace and Craven Road, he waited in his freezing cold car outside the flat. within sight of the side door and the window, with the light on and the curtains ajar. We know that that client was not Leonard, as at roughly 12:20 p.m, he rang the flat's phone, offered her £15 for the night, and in his own words,
I phoned her. She was unable to speak openly, but I suggested I should make my way to the flat.
Which begs the question, if he had planned to pay her £15, how could he do it with only £4 in his pocket, plus the £1 she would pay him for the books? Picked up by Ernest at 12:30 a.m, Ruby would state,
I've got someone here all night. I'm sorry. You'll have to stay at a hotel.
Supposedly, Ernest inquired,
I asked her, is it the bearded man?
but as far as we know, she did not confirm who he was. And neither did she mention her pre-arranged client for 3 a.m. At 12:45 a.m, on the corner of Hertford Street and Park Lane, as she got into a taxi with a client, Ernest would state,
It was the last time I saw her alive.
But we know for a fact that that client was Leonard. Having departed Hertford Street at 12:45 a.m, a taxi driver later identified Ruby and Leonard as the couple he had dropped off at 32 Westbourne Terrace. Just shy of 1 a.m, about the time that Ernest was driving around Piccadilly, they entered flat 7.
I asked her again to allow me to stay with her for the rest of the night, but she was adamant that I must be clear of the flat by 3 o'clock, when her other client was due to arrive. I eventually agreed. There was no doubt in my mind that she was offering intercourse, and the question of payment was not discussed.
The residents of flat 4 immediately below and flat 6 to the side would hear nothing all night. When questioned, Leonard would state,
She was most friendly. She made cold meat sandwiches and tea. We perused some pornographic photographs, and she shared a large box of biscuits with me.
although when the room was examined, there were no signs of any biscuits, tea or sandwiches.
It was then, about 1:30 a.m,
Around the time that Ernest arrived at Mr. and Mrs. Murden's,
she suggested we go to bed and disrobed. She put a coat and dress on the settee. I didn't see her with a handbag. I also undressed with the exception of my socks. I joined her in bed, where we had intercourse in the normal way. After which we talked about prison life, her daughter, told jokes, and so on and so forth for about half an hour. We both then washed our sexual parts in the kitchenette. We both dressed, and I left her to await the arrival of the other man.
possibly from the West Country.
I think it was about 2:15, or a shade later, but not much, when she let me out of the flat, but I let myself out of the outside door.
There were no witnesses to what happened, but Ruby and Leonard. And although
I was carrying a black briefcase containing photographs which I intended to leave with Ruby, but I don't know why I didn't.
his departure fits her time of death, just 45 minutes before the West Country man was due to arrive. A mystery man who was never identified. As a fantasist, even if Leonard was an innocent man, his next few hours were curiously odd. At about 2:30 a.m, a taxi picked him up in Paddington. It drove him east to Euston Station, where he took a second cab northwest to his home in Primrose Hill, arriving at 3 a.m, having crossed several parks and a canal. At 7 a.m, over breakfast, his ex-partner Teresa asked him if he'd met the prostitute and sold her the books. He said,
I did not. I went to the Lion's Corner House in Marble Arch and caught the last tube home.
And yet not a single staff member nor customer could recall seeing him. That morning, he took the clothes he was wearing to a laundry and had them professionally cleaned. At 7:45 a.m, on Archer Street in Soho, a lodger in the same house saw Leonard with his recognisably bushy beard, and he waved. At 10 a.m, at 44 Brewer Street, William Gasser, a barber, was paid 4 shillings to shave off the sides of his beard, leaving him with a goatee. And at 2:30 p.m, that same lodger saw Leonard again and would state he had quite a lot of beard. It was bushy, but now it was quite short. But was this the act of a guilty man covering his tracks? Or an innocent man going about his day? Having investigated Ernest's alibi of a mysterious bearded man, a fingerprint found in Ruby's room had led to the criminal record of a man convicted of the crime of obscenity, who knew the victim, had visited her flat, and would later confess that he'd had sex with her. But was he really her killer? On Sunday the 15th of January at 6 p.m, one day after her body was found, police questioned Leonard Vincent Atter, at which he confessed to seeing her but denied killing her, and he was charged the next day. Described as a fantasist and a liar, he would boast that he had had sex with Ruby without using a condom. But as no semen was found inside of her, the pathologist would state it was unlikely that sex had taken place. In a cupboard at his lodging, police found a black briefcase containing pornographic photos and a lurid story penned by himself, which he confirmed were his and which he had taken to Ruby's in order to sell. Given the brutality of her injuries, believed to have been inflicted by an axe, although his clothes were clean, tests later found traces of human blood on his sleeves, legs and shoes, as well as on a handkerchief with traces of lipstick, and on the inside of his briefcase, as this is how they believe he carried the axe. With a short-handled axe used for chopping up kindling missing from the communal kitchen, given his odd route home, having possibly dumped the murder weapon in the nearby Regent's Canal, it was never found. Tried at the Old Bailey, on Wednesday the 21st of March 1956, Leonard Vincent Atter was found not guilty and later acquitted of Ruby's murder, with the judge, Mr. Justice Devlin, stating that the prosecution's case was just a collection of small, circumstantial pieces of evidence. With that, Leonard was discharged and released. The inquest was closed without announcing a verdict. The murder of 35-year-old Rubina Bolton, known as Ruby, remains unsolved. Hey folks, before we dive into Extra Mile, I wanted to give a little push to two super talented friends who have a new song out. Check me, I'm like a radio DJ. The band are called HUBTONE, and their song, That Change, was created to address domestic violence and gaslighting, and uses some real-life examples, including experiences by one of the creators. I love it, and I wanted to share it with you. For me, it's a wonderful mix of Lisa Stansfield and Portishead, and I hope you'll like it too. So let me play you a clip.
I thought we hit it off right off the bat. Got the looks, you got the chat. A sophisticated charlatan you came. I gave, we played. I felt so beautiful, you told me so. Heart so full it may explode. Riding high together, but that changed. You're a sociopath who won't look back. Got you knocked my nerves right off the track again.
To help support a worthy cause, live music and independent bands, you can watch the video for HUBTONE'S track That Change on YouTube, or listen to and download their music on Spotify and iTunes. There's links in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Whew, that's probably a 50. Yeah, okay. Whoa, cool, yeah. Ooh, time for the extra mile yawn. Oh my lord. Ooh. Oh god. Let's take off your little hat. There we go, folks. Hey, welcome to Extra Mile. See, I remembered to do it this time. There you go. Extra Mile. Unscripted, unedited, blah blah blah, waffle waffle waffle, etc. Oh dear. It's the first time I've done that. So that was because I was, as mentioned last week, although it's not last week, it's still the same day, because I was ahead of the game. I decided to do 2 episodes back to back, so I've recorded them both back to back. God, I'm not used to doing 2 back to back. It's tiring. Oh, anyway, good. So yes, I recorded the first one this morning. Then I went to Costa and I did a rough edit on the narration to get it clean and get it streamlined and balance out the sound. That takes a while to get it nice and balanced. I hate when you listen to a podcast and it's like, and you're like, what? I can't hear you. You're too loud. It's like, especially when people pay for podcast producers. There's a relatively famous one, and they have a well-known podcast producer on it that I listened to recently. Terrible. Like the intro music goes over the host. I couldn't hear the host at the start, and I had to message them and go, please do that again. Please redo that. I normally wouldn't do that, but it was like it totally ruined the episode. I couldn't hear anything, so I had to let them know that they'd really ballsed up. Not good if you're paying someone good money to produce and edit and do all the stuff they're meant to do, and they can't be asked to listen back to the episode. Bad form. That's why I spend days editing these, because I like to get it right. Should I get myself a tea? Let's do me a tea. Let's do Michael Buchanan done a tea. Here we go. Gonna open a window while I'm there. That's got water in it. I hope that's enough. And I'm gonna have a Yorkshire tea, a biscuit one. There we go. Pop that in there. Oh, I've got some donuts. You may be wondering how my diet is going. It's going great. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you. My diet is going great. If the diet is chocolate based, oh man, I like having a twirl with my coffee. Oh man. Anyway, Eva likes a bit of meat on me. That's what she says. So yeah. Oh, well, can't be helped. Yeah, no, I'm having a biscuit tea, one of those Yorkshire biscuit teas. I can't remember who messaged me. Well, I think it was Holly, one of the Patreon subscribers, and she was like, oh yeah, it was Holly. She'd ordered a mug, one of the exclusive Murder Mile mugs. Ooh, she'd ordered one of the Stay Safe Eat Cake mugs. I've got Reg Christie mugs. I've still got some Police Constable Arsenal Guinness mugs still available. Hopefully, hoping to meet PCAG soon. Obviously, he's been busy because of the Royal Queen's funeral. That keeps him very busy. He was protecting the streets. You're welcome. So they're all still available. Why did I get into that? Oh yeah, no. Holly was like, can you send some tea bags with that? Because she wanted to have some English tea, and she mentioned about the biscuit one. So I went out and bought some of the Yorkshire tea biscuit flavour ones. They're very nice and sweet. You don't need too many sugars with it. What else is going on in the world? I've got wonky shoes. I've realised that I have one foot that's on a bit of a camber that's going inwards, and I was like, why does my leg hurt? And then I looked at my shoes and realised my left one is leaning in. So I've made myself some special insoles. You're welcome. What else is going on? Oh yeah, with this episode, so what I'm going to do now is, because there's a lot to cover and there's too much to cover in Extra Mile, I sometimes do this with big episodes. Oh, burpee. That's a pate coming back. I will be doing so. I do Walk With Me. If you're a Patreon subscriber, above, there's a second tier and above. That is Walk With Me. So I have a little rant as I walk around, and I tell you all the little secrets of all the things that I've edited and put into the episode, and all the music and all the little sounds and all the things that I normally wouldn't tell you in Extra Mile. But for episodes like this that need clarity, I think sometimes it's worthwhile doing a kind of a nice walkthrough. So I'm going to do a special one for everyone, all Patreon subscribers, which is why it's worth being a Patreon subscriber. Also, I think I'm going to start doing something new on Patreon this week as well, something different. You'll know about it after next week's show. What else has happened? I was just walking home from Costa, where I was abused the Wi-Fi, and I saw a muntjac, a nice little muntjac deer, just standing in the middle of the, I was going to say canal, the towpath, not the canal. That would be weird. That was nice. There we go. Just going to pop this here. Let it brew for a bit. Let it brew. There we go. Nice tea. It's a nice tea. It's got a nice little sweet flavour, and it's got a. I think they've added kind of a special something to it to make it taste a little bit more milky. What else is going on? This Sunday, which means 2 Sundays ago, so you'll have missed it, I will be meeting up with a good friend of mine, Mr. Dan Runing, who's a Swedish true crime author and true crime podcaster. Got in contact a little while ago, came on the tour, we had a couple of beers. He was coming back to the UK. So he was like, let's meet up again and we'll probably have some more beers. Yes, that'll be good. That'll be nice. He was the one, I mentioned it ages ago. He does all the Swedish true crime podcasts. And he's done the translated version of the Denmark Place Fire. So my version of that. So that went out to his people. It was really nice. I didn't understand it because it's all in Swedish. So, goody. But, you know, I was like, goody, Denmark Place Fire. It was pretty good. It's like I could hear bits because I knew the script. So that's all good. Big thank you to some Patreon to Patreon supporters for this week. So I'm having a giggle, and you'll understand why in a second. Okay, so this is not with this first name, so this is fine. This is a normal name. So thank you to these Patreon supporters. Casey Jablonski. Thank you, Casey. That's much appreciated. That's not why I was laughing. Thank you to Stevie. That's not why I'm laughing. A thank you to Rick Dangerous. Lovely. I hope that is your real name. And of course, I'm guessing that this next name is not real. A thank you to Hugh Jacock. Hugh Jacock. Or if you don't put a gap in it, huge cock. There you go. That's the level that we're at now. That's the level that we're at. Someone is giving their name as huge cock. There we go. Lovely. Thank you for that. I did get it immediately. As soon as I saw it, I went, that's not their real name. And then I looked at their email address and went, yeah, it's definitely not their real name. So, thank you for that. That was good. Let's dive into some quiz questions, then we'll dive into some extra stuff. But don't forget, if you want to join Patreon, I don't pressure people into Patreon. I don't, because, difficult times ahead, isn't it? Difficult times ahead. I think cost of food, impossible. Cost of fuel, impossible. I don't watch the news anymore, but I still know that Russia is being twats and that we've got an ineffective government and that everything's just shite. So yeah, you don't have to if you don't want to, but if you do, if you want something that's an interesting distraction, I put on all the crime scene photos and little videos and some extra stuff and some competitions. If you want something that's a distraction, as little as $3 a month. Unfortunately, it's all in dollars. It's very annoying. Anyway, let's do some quiz questions, and then we'll crack on to some extra stuff. Lovely. Question number 1. In what town was Leonard born? Or is it a city? I think it's a town. Question number 2. How many brothers and sisters did Leonard have? Question number 3. In the army, what was his rank and regiment? This was something that I struggled to say during this. It's not easy when you're dyslexic and you have a bit of a stutter, although I have to say, after almost 5 years now, by the time you listen to this, it will be 5 years, 5 years of doing Murder Mile podcast, and it was close to 8 years for the walking tour. It's really helped kind of sort out my not problems, because they're not really problems. You use them as to help you out in life. I'm waffling again. Let's crack on. Question number 4. Which 2 religious magazines did Leonard write for? Interesting. Question number 5. What was the name of Leonard's wife? You're welcome to have first name, surname, or if you can get all 3 in there, that'd be great. Question number 6. How much money per week did Leonard earn from writing porn? Question number 7. What day was he released from prison? Question 8. What was the nearest park to Leonard's home? Question number 9. Name 2 murders, as mentioned in Murder Mile, which happened near his home. I've got 3 listed on here, so you could have any of them. Although, to be honest, if you can name 1, that'd be good. And question number 10. At what address did he live at in London? Right. Let's dive into some stuff. I tell you what, I'll read Leonard's statement. I'm not going to do it in his voice. Although I did enjoy doing his voice. His voice wasn't as much fun as Joseph King, the Stalker Within. That was a really nice one to do. Good night, Daddy. I still enjoyed Joseph. If only he'd come back so I could do Good Night, Daddy again. Let's do his statement. So, when he was arrested, he gave his statement. This was originally on the 15th of January. So this is the day that the body was discovered, but he wasn't charged until the next day. So you can see how fast the police were working on this, even though they got a primary suspect who was her husband, and all the pieces were leading in at the same time. They're not going, right, well, it's him and it's no one else. They're looking and they're expanding and they're kind of checking out every avenue. It's interesting talking to a lot of the detectives that I've kind of spoken to over the years around things, and they always say, you have to take everything with, even if someone comes to you with a kind of piece of information which is clearly bullshit. I remember talking to the detective chief inspectors about it with the Ginger A case, when I said, at least a third of that file is just bullshit of people coming up to the police and going, I think it was my ex-husband who did it. He's a nasty bastard, he is. Even though it's utter shit and they know it, they have to take it all seriously, because there is the chance that you will miss something big and, you'll just dismiss it and, it could be the real culprit. So they have to take everything seriously. So you can see how seriously they took Ernest's comment about the bearded man, with nothing else, no name, no address, no other details, except it was a man with a beard. But they'd found a fingerprint. They managed to link it to a man who didn't really have a beard. He'd only had a beard for about 6 weeks, but he had a beard on the night of the murder. So it's kind of all these pieces started to come together. So, it's fascinating. This is why I found this case fascinating. Even though it's solved, but it's not solved. It's technically not solved. There's so many pieces in it that that's why I need to do this extra thing, which I'll do after this for Walk With Me, the extra. So, right, let's do this. This is Leonard's statement. Okay. On Thursday, the 12th of January, 1956, he gets the date wrong there. It's actually, no, it's right there. Thursday, the 12th of January, 1956, at about 11 o'clock, I went to the district of Mayfair with the purpose of meeting a prostitute I knew and succeeded in selling her 2 odd pornographic books which I had in my possession. She hangs around in those streets at the bottom of Hertford Street. Bottom of Hertford Street leading to Park Lane, there's kind of a tiny mini roundabout, and next to it is kind of just up is the Dorchester, right next to it is the Hilton, next to that is Nobu, where all the pricks hang out. He said, on my way to Hyde Park Corner tube station, which is about 2 minutes away, I met a woman I now know to be Ruby Bolton. I knew her then just as Ruby. She was talking to another prostitute on the corner of Hertford Street and Park Lane. She greeted me warmly, so I stopped and talked to them both until the other girl left with the other man. We don't know who the other lady is. It was in the police file, but as mentioned in the last episode, it's since been removed, so I don't remember who the girl was, unfortunately. I was talking to Ruby for about 5 minutes. Of course, this is all Leonard's statement, and he is a fantasist and a liar, so you need to be very careful about everything he says. She first asked me where I'd been for so long. I had been with her before, May 1955, 9 or 10 times when I had intercourse with her for pavement. So not on that month, but since. I told her where I had been, although knowing Leonard, it could have been just one night. He does seem to be a bit rampant. I told her where I'd been and explained that I was only in the area through my efforts to raise a few shillings by the sale of books. I explained that I was very badly off financially. I had an odd few shillings in my pocket plus a £1 note for the books. A £1 note he'd been given from his girlfriend Teresa, ex-girlfriend Teresa. She sympathised with me and went so far as to say that I should have a cup of tea with her the following night. Now that could be possible because she was a lovely lady. She did have tea in her flat and she was very pleasant. And he was a previous customer who, if you remember, everyone had said quite a nice guy, pays well, has some odd quirks, but then who doesn't? But there was never any hint of violence with him at all. She explained that she was too busy on Thursday night. She told me I would be sure to find her on a usual patch late on Friday night. I got home about midnight that night, which was confirmed by Teresa. On Friday night, I arrived at the corner of Hertford Street at about 11:30 p.m, which corroborates with Teresa's story because she said he left at about 11 o'clock or just after. So leaving their location, which I'm not going to say where it was because that's a question. I'm not going to say which tube stop they got on because that's also a question. Well done, Michael, you're learning. Intended to take advantage of her offer just in time to see her leaving in a taxi with another man. So 11:30-ish, it was actually more 11:40 if you go by Ernest's accounts. That could have been the little guy, the guy who we referred to as the little guy. It makes it slightly uncertain in this because Leonard is also a little guy as well. I think he's about 5'3". They said that was his height, so it's really hard to pin down. He said, it occurred to me that it would be a waste of time to wait for her if she was away for the night. So I allowed her time to reach her home, and then because obviously he knows where she's staying, and then phoned her on the ambassador number. I think it was 8325. He's not too far off of that, or something like that. She was obviously unable to speak openly on the phone because she would have had a client with her, but suggested I should make my way to her flat. Now this is incorrect because he actually met her back at Hertford Street and Park Lane, so he kind of confuses his story a little bit here. This I did after about half an hour and was admitted by her. See, that's incorrect, because we know that they found the taxi driver later on, and the taxi driver confirmed that it was a man with a bushy beard who was all dressed in black, and behind his back he seemed to be hiding something, although the taxi driver later saw that it was kind of a black attaché briefcase, inside of which we know was the pornography and his story, but also potentially the axe. Why take an axe when you're going out to have sex with a prostitute? Who knows? Question. So she said I should make my way to her flat. I did this after about half an hour and was admitted by her. We conversed for some minutes, but she asked me to allow her time to accept another client or two, after which she would be free until the arrival at 3 o'clock of a regular client from the West Country. Regular client from the West Country, we do not know who he is. There's no evidence for this at all. There's some in the police file, but as mentioned in the previous episode, it was redacted before I got back to it. I've put in a Freedom of Information request, as I do. I actually put it in for this one about 7 months ago, and they're still mulling over it. So if it is released and I get a chance to view it again, I'm going to go back in and get some more of the details out so we can kind of nail down who the West Country man is. She'd said she'd had a busy night, so I asked her to refuse him and to allow me to stay all night. But she said she couldn't do that as he hadn't booked a room. This is the West Country man. We chatted about things in general for a few minutes, and I mentioned to her about a JP, which is a Justice of the Peace, from whom I said I hope to get some financial assistance in a few days' time. Now, this is bullshit. Apparently this Justice of the Peace owed him £500. Utter dog shit. We had been talking in terms of having a chat, but there was no doubt in my mind that she was offering intercourse as well, and the question of payment was not discussed. I then left the flat, and it was between 12:15 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. She gave me the impression that she was leaving immediately. I walked slowly from there to Hertford Street and Bayswater Road, by which time she had entertained another man and was back on the corner of the street. Now that doesn't correlate with the correct time, is because we know that he called her on the phone at roughly around 12:20 a.m. and we know that 12:30 Ernest had picked her up from outside the flat. So Ernest would have seen her and Leonard together, and she would have got in the car, and therefore Leonard would have seen Ernest and her get in the car. And that's the point where Leonard drove Ruby back to Park Lane, and that's where she said, I'm meeting a guy tonight, so you're going to have to stay at the hotel. So again, there's a miss of correlations there. Although he could have got his timings wrong. Leonard may have been the person who she met at about 11. Well, he would have left his flat at 11ish. It would have taken him half an hour to get to Park Lane, so that would only leave about 10 minutes before she was seen again at 11:40. Possible, but again, it's hard to keep these timings in check. I asked her again to allow me to stay with her for the rest of the night, but she was adamant that I must be clear of the flat before 3 o'clock, when her other client was due to arrive. I eventually agreed, and we travelled to her flat by taxi. I paid the cab fare. I don't know how much it was. I imagine I gave a 9p tip. He didn't, he gave 3. Ruby did not give him anything. She never spoke to the driver. We went into the flat and she was most friendly and generous. She made some cold meat sandwiches, I think beef and tea. That's not the same sandwich, beef and tea. During which time she occupied me with a perusal of a collection of pornographic photographs. She even went to the lengths of sharing a large box of biscuits, which had been a personal Christmas present with me. It was then about 1:30 a.m. She then suggested we should go to bed, and disrobed. She put her coat and dress on the city. Now, this was found, and if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can see it on the crime scene photos. But I don't know where she put the others. I think now she put all of her clothes on the settee, which she did. I did not see her with a handbag at all. Now, it may seem that he's saying that, but don't forget, when people are given their statements, this is not someone sitting down and writing it. This is a communication between Leonard and the detective, and then probably the sergeant. And the sergeant is writing it down, and the detective is asking the questions. Like, did you see her with a handbag? No, I did not. Therefore, he writes down, I did not see her with a handbag at all. So it looks like he's saying, I didn't see her with a handbag at all. It's not that. I didn't see. It's just basically them confirming everything that they need to say in order to get it down in the statement. So it's not really a true representation of kind of his wording. I also undressed, leaving my clothes on the fireside chair, could have done, with the exception of my socks, which I kept on. I took this out of the episode. His socks were really, really terrible. They were really holey and horrible. That was one of the few things that the police found. They did find his clothes, which had been taken to the dry cleaners, but not, well, taken to the cleaners, the laundrette, but hadn't been cleaned fully. The socks hadn't. He'd thrown them in a bin out back, but they didn't seem to have any kind of traces of blood on them. So he may have probably ball washed them, which would have done it. Or probably not ball wash, because actually, as we know, ball wash doesn't get rid of blood, but a cold wash is better. There you go. There you go. Obviously, all ladies know that. Most blokes won't know that, but yes. Cold wash if you want to get rid of blood, not hot wash. You can hear a crappy bike going past now. I joined her in bed. This is Leonard again, not me. I joined her in bed where we had intercourse in the normal manner. Just going to leave a pause there. After which we talked of prison life, her daughter, told jokes, and for so on and so forth for about half an hour. We both, it's my favourite bit, you can enjoy this, we both washed our sexual parts in the kitchenette. I used the basin. Nice. We both dressed and I left to await the arrival of the other man. We don't know who the other man is. I think it was then about 2:15. That kind of does tie up to the when he was picked up by the taxi driver who took him to Euston Station. It could have been a shade later, but not much. She let me out of the flat itself, but I let myself out of the outside door. I should have mentioned that soon after our arrival at the flat the second time, we have no correlation of whether he did go back to the flat and then went out and then went back in. We only have a correlation of a first time, but it could be possible. Ruby handed me £5, which she implied could be repaid when I could afford it. Now he keeps reference, as before, as we mentioned before, he's got this obsession with the idea that he's so great at sex that often he doesn't have to pay for sex. The sex workers are like, wow, you're great, or yeah, please do me. Which is a very Reg Christie thing to say, because he was exactly the same kind of narcissist who was obsessed with the idea that he had a big cock. Now, as we know, Ruby earned roughly £11 that night. We don't know what the second client gave her, so I've only accounted it as about £11, which is about £300. He's saying that she gave him £5, which is about £125, which is a lot of money, and it's probably around a third of what she earned that night. So why would she do that? I mean, she's in really a serious financial strife. So why would she do that? I think it's more likely that he may have taken the money from her. He did have money afterwards. After I left the flat, I walked 100 yards and stopped a taxi which approached from my rear and directed him to Euston Road. That makes sense because he's not too far away from his flat. My intention was to visit Bedford, where he comes from, for a day, but I found out the driver had taken me to Euston Station instead of St Pancras. I changed my mind and caught the cab back to my present home. The cab set me down on the corner of and Primrose Hill Road. I think I paid the cab out of a 10-shilling note and got 4 shillings and 6pence change. The police would later do a test, and they worked out that actually the journey itself would only have cost 2 shillings and 3pence, so he was entirely out with that. During the evening, I was wearing my blazer and flannels, an Air Force blue raincoat, that's just a colour, not that he was in the Air Force, black shoes, navy blue socks, and a grey cotton shirt. The shirt is at the laundry. It was taken in yesterday to the laundry round the corner. I was carrying a small black briefcase containing photographs and a story I intended to leave with Ruby, but I don't know why I didn't leave them. It's interesting because he needed the money. However hard up I may have been on Thursday night, I had the prospect of a loan of £4 from a friend, which was Teresa, which he had got from her, and started work on Friday morning in a position which paid £9 a week plus. I was also well equipped as regards clothes and had no accommodation worries. Not strictly true. The fact that during my imprisonment I underwent psychiatric treatment at my own request, not strictly true, for 7 months, which was also intended only to correct a minor aberration of my mind, which previously got me into trouble. That was writing the pornography and sending it to the girls who'd been sexually assaulted. What a lovely man. Did not indicate that I had any violent tendencies. And I cannot disagree with the suggestion that something happened on Friday night, which I have not told you about in this statement. The account I have given is, in my mind, both clear and complete. Sorry, not competent. So yeah, it's originally in the story he kind of said that he may have had a blackout, which everyone seems to go with. Everyone seems to go, oh, I may have had a blackout. Do you know, when you hear all these stories about people murdering someone, they all seem to have a blackout. They all seem to say, oh, the red mist came over and I don't remember what happened. It's always convenient, isn't it? I mean, it could happen. Very convenient. Right, let's do some quiz questions, folks. Question number 1. In what town was Leonard born in? I may have just given away that answer in one of my last bits. It was Bedford. Bedford in Bedfordshire. Question number 2. How many brothers and sisters did he have? He had 2. One of each. Oh, no. He had 2. 2 of each. He had 2 of each. He had 2 brothers and 2 sisters because he was one of 5. Right. Does that make sense? I think he had 2 older brothers. Yeah, he had 2 older brothers. He had an older sister, but he had a younger sister as well. So he was one of 5. Got ballsed up that answer. Question number 3. In the army, what was his rank and regiment? He was an infantryman in Blackwatch. Sounds like bullshit, but he was. We've got records to prove it. Question number 4. What 2 religious magazines did he write for? They were, so there's one during wartime with the Salvation Army called Our Little Soldier, but the famous one, which is, I think it's still running today, is War Cry. Question number 5, what was the name of Leonard's wife? You can have first name, but if you've got the full name, well done. It was Lena Frieda Schaefer. Unfortunately, there are some books out there that have totally cocked up, and they list her as Lisa Schaefer. It's not, it's Lena. You need to check the marriage license, people, when you're doing your research. The problem is people see it in a news article and they go, yep, that'll do, and they don't realise that it's a spelling mistake. Idiots. Question number 6. How much money per week did he earn from writing pornography? It was £20, which is good money. So that was, what was that? About 400 quid a week, which is, don't forget, 400 quid a week is different. That's what the equivalent is now, but your kind of buying power back in the 1950s was a hell of a lot more. So, yeah, that would have been a good old wage. Question number 7. What day was he released from prison? It was New Year's Eve. Question number 8. What was the nearest park to his home? It was Regent's Park. Question number 9. Name 2 murders as mentioned in Murder Mile which happened near his home. I mean, there's technically 4 here. So the first 2 possible murders by the Blackout Ripper. We've also got the Regent's Park Zoo elephant keepers and the discovery of Rennie Hanrahan's body. Pretty much all of which happened in this season. So there you go. And final question, at what address did he live at in London? It was 6 St George's Terrace. And again, in a lot of unfortunately there's books that make reference to this case, but not much because there's not a lot out there, and there's a couple of pieces out there, and people keep making reference to him staying at 60 St George's Terrace. Didn't stay at 60. Do you want to know how I know that? because I've access to all of the maps. The University of Scotland do a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful little website where it's an overlay of maps, and it's all the maps that they know of the United Kingdom. And you can look at today's map and you can overlay it with like about 20 or 30 other maps. So I went in and I found this street only has 11 houses. It only goes from 1 to 11, so it can't be 60. So I checked the electoral roll, and it was 6. So there we go. But I know that I'm going to get someone who's written a blog about this going, I think you'll find it was 60 St George's Terrace. And then I'll go, can you prove it? And they'll go, yes. Look at this book. It's written. A person written a book. So therefore it's... Oh, dear. I'm ready for it. Right, folks. That was that. Oh, look, I've got a cake there. I've got a cake. The cake I mentioned last week is still the same cake that's over there, only I didn't eat it. So I'm going to eat it in a second. So that's me done. Hope you enjoyed that, folks. That was The Bearded Man Part 2, the final part. If you want to know more, become a Patreon subscriber. Subscribe to the tier, which is Walk With Me and above, and therefore you get to hear all this extra stuff that I'm going to add in. Next week, because I've got the 3 weeks away, because I need to do the rest of the research for the rest of the season, because there's a lot of cases where there's no information out there, but I've done my research in the archives, I've seen the files, I just need to piece it all together. So it's going to be something interesting and different, and you will all be going, oh, that's interesting. I hope. Anyway, that's me done. Have yourself a good week, folks. Stay safe and be good. Thanks for supporting the show, and best wishes. Stay safe, eat cake. Lots of love. Bye. Oh, I can't work out how to... Oh, man. How do I switch this off? Oh, my mouse wasn't working. That was meant to be my big out then. Right, this is the out. Okay. Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.